and Britt helps both large corporations and small businesses with insurance, risk management, and employee benefits using the same values they've held true for over 30 years: knowledge, vision, accountability, and service. More information is at bmbinc.com.
Hello, I'm Marcia Kavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. Well, there are some weeks when one story dominates everything else, and that was certainly the case this week when a local rising star on the national scene fell victim to a shooter. We'll look at the career to date of House Majority Whip Steve Scalise and his impact locally. Shooting was in the news on the home front as well, as the city took the lead in gun violence while the mayor and other officials squabble over what to do about it. In Baton Rouge, a special session of the legislature tries to resolve some issues that the regular session could not. And our Future Watch segment reveals upcoming change in the Audubon Institute's facilities. Joining us are tonight's Informed Sources: ERROL LABORDE, producer of Informed Sources; Mike Perlstein, investigative reporter, WWL-TV Channel 4; Don Ostrom, Channel 12's Future Watch reporter; and Stephanie Grace, columnist, The New Orleans Advocate. We go to ERROL first to talk about what was just really an unbelievable event, the shooting of our congressman, our Louisiana congressman from the 1st District.
Yeah. To give you an idea of just how important he is to the state politically, there are 8 people that represent Louisiana and Washington, 6 representatives and 2 senators. Of those 8, 6 of them were elected since 2015. That's how green our congressional delegation is. The other 2, of course, are Scalise, who was elected in 2008, and then Cedric Richmond. And so he adds the experience that we have in there. I mean, he's the go-to guy for information. And so not only is he important and powerful on the national level, but he's really what we need in the state. I mean, when you just imagine in the past 3 years, in the past year, 3 of the 8 were elected. And that was prompted by David Vitter's election because there's a new senator there. Then 2 congressmen ran for his seat, and so those was vacated, and there were new people. And I bet a lot of people are watching who've never heard of Clay Higgins and Mike Johnson, but they're 2 of our members in Congress. I mean, the thing about interested in Scalise's career to date is that he was always seen as a rising star in politics. And when he was first elected to the State House of Representatives in '95, I think a lot of people saw him as someone running for that 1st Congressional District seat one day. Now, at the time, there was David Vitter who was in the way, who, of course, had a lot of ambitions. And so Vitter won that seat. But people said, well, you know, Vitter's going to probably run for something else someday. And then when Vitter ran for Senate, then this seemed like an opportunity for Scalise. But then people said, whoa, not so fast. There's Bobby Jindal. And there was a real movement to do something for Bobby Jindal, and so he
wasn't from the district.
Right. Yeah, wasn't even from the district.
Yeah.
And so Scalise took it for the party. You know, he stood back and he supported Jindal, and Jindal, of course, was just positioning himself to run for governor. Had Scalise not done that, and had he won, I mean, nothing be even that much more powerful. And so Jindal really served briefly, just a couple of years. And then once that was over, then Scalise finally had his shot at running for Congress, and he's been reelected ever since. And this seems like it's a district that's had a lot of turnover because of circumstances over the past few years, but it's added he's added some real stability. His next break came in 2014 when Eric Cantor, who was the majority leader, was defeated. And that opened the way for a movement and positioning, which opened the way for the whip's position. And in kind of an upset, Steve Scalise became the majority whip, with the Republicans now being the majority. So all of a sudden, he had a position of national prominence. And so it's been an interesting career. He stood on the side when he had to. He was a good party guy when he had to. And when the right opportunities came, the party supported him.
And what's so interesting is, you know, that seat has been such a power seat for so long. First, when back in 1995, Bob Livingston was still in that seat, remember? And he was appropriations chairman, and then he was chosen to be Speaker of the House, and then ended up resigning on the day of the Clinton impeachment, which set up the Vitter election, as you said. But it's always been, you know, David Vitter and Bobby Jindal. everybody knew, like you said, everybody knew they were short-timers. They were looking to use it as a stepping stone for something else. Steve Scalise really wants to be in the House, and he belongs there. And he, you know, that's his personality. That's kind of what he loves doing. So the fact that by the time he finally got in, he rose very, very quickly, it's probably not really a surprise. And I think he is looking at being somebody who stays and builds a career there, and certainly he's successful.
And you're certainly at a perch now when you're the whip. You're certainly in the position to be the party leader one day,
Exactly.
and then if things go right, to be the Speaker of the House. And so he's in that track. And of course, somebody like Paul Ryan is someone who seems to be going places too. And so the Speaker of the House position may be open one day too. So he's in a good position, and. We're not ruling out that he's going to come back to it.
And then something else that's kind of interesting, you know, you mentioned Cedric Richmond, who's the other senior congressman. I mean, only since 2010. So these are very junior senior congressmen we have. But they've both risen very quickly. Cedric Richmond's the head of the Congressional Black Caucus now. And they, you know, one's
they have an interesting partnership.
They really do.
With opposing views, but a very good friendship.
Very opposing views, and it really grew out of their time together in Baton Rouge in the legislature, where, you know, historically things have not been as partisan. People stay up there and they play basketball after work and they kind of trash talk each other. Whereas in Congress, you hear more and more of this. People just kind of stick to their own and then they go home. And so they really brought this friendship to Washington with them, and it's benefited the state. I can tell you that they, you know, they help each other when they can. They work together on flood control issues and things like that.
And some of that's a reflection on Steve Scalise himself and
Exactly.
his personality. He's a very personable guy.
I think anybody, whether
People
you agree
really
with him or
like
not,
him.
they
Yeah.
would tell you he
Yes,
is a super
absolutely.
duper nice guy.
He is.
He's
He
good
doesn't
people.
make it personal, even though he's very, very partisan.
Yeah. I happen to work in the same building where Scalise has his local office. And it happens sometimes, maybe like 2 or 3 times a year. You look out the window and you'll see some commotion. You'll see people walk around, and there's a demonstration. And they can't do it on the building grounds, so they need to go across the street on public space. And quite often it's a demonstration about immigration issues. But it's very peaceful. It's people walking and they make a few speeches. It's nothing rowdy. And probably it's something that they're hoping to gain some publicity for. But to have the whip right there in your district draws that sort of thing. And so you really kind of see democracy in action along Veterans Highway.
And he's around. I mean, people run into him. His kids are in school here. You know, he's
Very accessible.
Very
I
accessible
mean, you see all the
and happy to talk to
interviews,
anybody.
you know, that have been done this week with neighbors or with parish, you know, with parishioners who say he's just an ordinary guy, you know. He was on the roof, supposedly, of his home this past weekend just clearing stuff off. He's just an ordinary, nice guy.
It's interesting when they do these kind of looks at the personal wealth of members of Congress, he always comes down at the bottom, you know. I think that's another thing, that there are a lot of, you know, very wealthy people in Congress, which sets them apart. He's a middle-class, metairie guy.
That's what he is, indeed.
Well, especially on the day of the shooting, they had that special mass for him at St. Catherine, Siena. St. Catherine, Siena is sort of like the social center of that part of Metairie, along Old Metairie, and so that's a very symbolic place to have it.
Well, certainly when this tragic incident happened the other day, you know, the word was out first that the congressman was in stable condition, and then we heard later on, no, he really was in critical condition.
which are not.
Well, now, let me make an important point about
Yes.
that. First of all, stable is not a condition.
It means you're not changing. It means
Stable
you're stabilized.
means he is stabilized.
Stable.
Yes.
In other words, he's breathing and able to transport to the hospital. But there is no condition called stable. It's really small case stabilized. He was in critical from the beginning, and now with a briefing today on just, you know, from the physician on just how serious the condition was when he arrived at the hospital. About as critical as you can get, at risk of imminent death.
Imminent death,
Yeah, and certainly now he's, you know, gone through at least 3 surgeries. He has more. He will be facing, and I listened to some of that briefing too from the trauma surgeon, who I think they expect a recovery. He's going to they expect for him to make a full recovery if everything goes smoothly.
I got to tell you, and you know, having covered crime and police, I've actually witnessed abdomen wounds. This is not to be taken lightly. He is by no means out of the woods. He will require a lengthy stay in ICU. That part of the body, and in this case,
and with a high-powered weapon.
It was a high-powered assault rifle. There's a lot of you know, blood vessels, organs, and in this case, it hit a hip bone and shattered that. And there's always a risk of infection. First, they had to stop the risk of bleeding, which is
That was surgery number one, they
quite
said.
a serious and emergency task that they always handle right away. They actually save repairs of organs and other things for a later surgery just to get a patient out of shock, stop the bleeding, which apparently they have now done. So that's the good news, that they can have schedule future surgeries to repair some of the damage.
Well, gosh knows, all of our prayers are with him, with his family, with his friends.
We should add one thing. The doctor said he is expected to be able to walk and run again. So more good news.
And carry out his congressional duties down the line as he recovers.
By
But
run
he does
again,
have a
you mean
long
run
road
for
ahead.
office again?
Maybe
That too.
I hope he run in a baseball field, because that's where I
Right.
think he really wants to be.
Meanwhile, the trophy, which the Democrats won yesterday in a congressional baseball game, will reside in
Cedric
his...
Richmond's star turn on the mound and 3 hits. But it will
But the
be
trophy goes to Scalise's office. It will be there waiting for him to take a look at, because he loves that game. The best to the congressman and his family and friends, which are many in this area. We just are certainly praying for his full recovery. Mike, crime in the city of New Orleans, and the rate of shootings, which proportionately outranks Chicago and Baltimore, and they have pretty bad crime rates there.
Right. We've always surpassed Chicago per capita. Chicago got a lot of headlines because of a really bad spike in their shootings and killings, but they don't come close to New Orleans on a per capita basis. We're neck and neck with cities like Baltimore, St. Louis, and at this stage, we are vying once again for that murder capital of the country, the highest per capita murder rate. That'll obviously be determined, but if things remain on the trajectory that they're on, we're going to be in top 3 for probably the 9th time in the past 10 years. Right now, we're at 89 homicides for 2017. Put that into a little bit of perspective. If we go back 365 days, we've topped 200 in that period. So really the spike that we're seeing right now started in the latter half of 2016. It was kind of head-scratching in that there had been a lull right before that, but it has persisted into 2017, and now we get into those traditional hot summer months with kids out of school and some other factors that can feed into this kind of friction that leads to shootings.
Are these, are we revolving around drugs generally, or is it payback, or is it both? Or what is the cause of this?
The one thing that we do know, and there's so many factors and categories, but that most victims are shot by somebody that they know, rather than stranger shootings or random robberies that turn into shootings. These are beefs, and the beefs can be over drugs, over turf, or squabbles over girlfriends. And what we unfortunately have quite a bit of is retaliation shootings. Because the rate of clearance of both shootings and homicides is so low in New Orleans, that the street, as they say, tends to take care of its own business because police aren't in there making arrests. And if you or your group or your compadres have been shooting and gunning for another group, and police do not catch up to that, there's a high likelihood in New Orleans that that group is going to seek retaliation. Mm-hmm. And again, it's rather fluid in that, as we know, New Orleans doesn't have the traditional gang structure of cities like New York and Chicago, but we have these small, very, very tight-knit gangs that are often bound by blood and neighborhood, in which shoot one member of that group, and then you will have several other of his close friends and family now gunning for some kind of retaliation.
And so the number of policemen and the ranks are low. Is that a part of the problem too?
That's a huge issue, and we've obviously looked at that for several years now. And the real stubborn, I think, problem across the board, and no one is more frustrated than Mayor Landrieu, who people blame for freezing, NOPD hiring for 2 years, dug this deep hole. They're about 400 officers down. I think his projection was they would be able to hire their way out of the problem, but they have not been able to do that. For the past couple of years, they've basically broken even on hires versus attrition. So the result of that are some things that have really fueled some of this violent crime trend, which is a dismantled district narcotics patrols. You see drug dealing on the corner, you know, a homeowner can call and usually get some kind of, you know, police presence. That's been basically dismantled for lack of resources.
So are we going to continue this pace through the rest of this year? Is there any hopes that maybe it'll slow down?
Well, right now,
that?
they just don't have either manpower or resources to change what's going on in the street. Now, these things are notoriously hard to predict. Shooting and murder rates climb up and down. But just to put things in a little bit of perspective, if we go back for a full year, we look at 89 homicides. There have also been 562 individual shootings, many of which don't end in a death. And of those 562, just to once again put it into bigger perspective, 710 individuals have been shot and wounded. So it's a vast problem that is very stubborn in finding a solution.
And the DA is kind of pointing the finger at the mayor, too.
Oh, that's another issue, yeah.
We'll get into that another time,
Okay, right now we're going to get over to the legislature, which has had its fair share of problems to deal with as well.
Yes.
It does look like we have a budget.
It does look like we do, yes. The Senate on Friday passed a budget. The key thing was getting the House to pass a budget, and that happened on Wednesday. And you'll remember last week the regular session ended without a budget, which is what triggered an immediate special session. There was hope, really a lot of talk, that they would be able to avoid that. In the end, they couldn't, because the House just, you know, there's this conservative group in the House that refused to go along with what the governor and the Senate, which is also majority Republican but less conservative, wanted to do. There were some breakaways within the Republican caucus who basically there was a test vote as the clock ticked down. Walt Leger put it up. And they got 53 votes, which indicated that there probably were enough votes in the House just to pass a budget. But that was a procedural maneuver, and then when it came down to the real question, the House Speaker ruled it out of order, so they never had that vote. When they came back the next week, they got 56 votes. So the House leadership side did not grow; it shrank actually, and those are Republicans who are basically saying, we got to do our jobs here. We got a budget that's pretty conservative. We got a lot of what we want, and you got to keep the lights on.
So TOPS funded fully,
TOPS is fully
higher
funded
education funded
for just this year, which is saying the whole problem not solved.
But $60 million needs to be set aside.
Okay. So the real issue was this conservative group that controls the House wanted to not budget some of the money that is projected to come in. And the reasoning is
in case it didn't all come in.
And historically, it often hasn't, and that's why we've had these mid-year budget cuts. So they said, let's just be conservative and hold some of this money back. The governor doesn't necessarily disagree with that in theory, but because we've had so many cuts, they basically, and it would kind of tie government's hands. They said, well, what if we hold some back, and of course less than what the House wanted, but we're not going to put it in law. We're going to just tell departments to do that. And the Republicans kind of said, well, that's, wink, wink, that's not really going to happen. So that's where things broke down. But in the end, the budget that was passed did include the directive to hold back $60 million, not spend it, and a mechanism to track that.
But we're still going to be facing that so-called fiscal cliff.
That's a totally different issue.
Lose a penny in sales tax next year.
This is all about just this year's budget.
Yeah.
Next year, we lose that temporary penny in sales tax that they passed last year in order to force themselves to do something this year that they did not do, which is come up with a more stable revenue system.
Right.
So there will be, and they can't address it in the regular session next year because it's not a fiscal session. So there, at some point, will be a special session.
Stephanie, probably the loneliest guy in Baton Rouge is the governor, who's a Democrat among all the Republicans. Given that, how did he do?
I think the budget is going to end up being kind of a win for him, even though he didn't get a lot of what he wanted, just because he got, there was a real challenge to his leadership, and he won it with the help of the Senate and John Alario. He's the one who kind of looked like the grown-up in this showdown situation, I think. The other big thing he was able to pass with a kind of an interesting bipartisan coalition is criminal justice reform. There's been a lot of talk about this. Louisiana being the nation and world incarceration
and really
capital.
to get that legislation through, it took the progressives and Democrats, as
and
well as
real
the
conservatives.
super conservative
I
Republicans.
mean, David
Polar
Vitter was
opposites
working on
together.
it. David Vitter ran an attack ad in the campaign against John Bel Edwards, saying he was soft on crime because they wanted to do that. And then it turns out he was on board too with libertarian groups and religious groups, and the Koch brothers were in town.
And you look at it as a conservative fiscal issue, saving money on
Exactly, and
incarceration.
also kind of a moral issue, giving people a chance, who are nonviolent criminals. There was some fight over what to do with lifers that it was kind of put aside. But the idea is to save money and also to get people back in their communities and help people get back when they get out of prison, help them get back on their feet,
Unbelievable.
get
It's a
jobs,
bipartisan
get food
issue.
stamps.
Can you believe
and, one of the interesting things is that this is nationally, it's kind of a bipartisan issue, but the one person who's really fighting it is Jeff Sessions, the Attorney General.
But it proved that there can be bipartisanship.
And the governor
working
came out and
toward a
said,
solution.
imagine what we could do if we would always, sit
Act
down
like
and
this.
actually talk to each other and agree not to attack. And
It would be nice.
It would be
In a
nice. I
perfect
don't think
world.
it's going to happen.
Because special session's coming up again.
We don't
then,
know when.
probably. Yes, all right.
But
Thanks a
we
lot,
will
Steph.
have a budget July 1st, so
Well,
that's
good.
something.
That's accomplishment. Okay, thanks a lot. Dawn, Future Watch, Audubon, new facilities. So,
Kind of thought on a
kinda
week
changing
like
up facilities.
this, we needed a little happy.
Yay.
Yeah.
Let's talk about animals
Yeah.
and playgrounds and that sort of thing.
Right.
So here we go. Audubon has a bunch of stuff happening. One of the most visible things right now is just work if you are a Audubon Park user or a parent who goes to playgrounds or whatever. The playground at St. Charles Avenue and Exposition Boulevard, the front corner of the park, is all fenced off with no signage about what's happening there. What is happening there is that a new playground is being installed and the whole area is being paved to enable easier access to the playground and the shelter there. That is expected to wrap up and be done in July. As you go into the zoo, there's the famous fountain with the rhinoceroses where everybody takes their pictures. Thanks to a large donation from the Angus R. Cooper Family Charitable Fund, they're getting new bronze elephants as well as bronze African lions. The hippos are also remaining there. They're changing up some of the geysers and the fountains to be able to do special things for nighttime events and special effects and lights. That is supposed to be complete later this fall. Jaguar Jungle area of the zoo is also expanding. It's in phase 2 of an expansion, and the area that to me at least seemed the neatest new thing there is a new nocturnal area, which is the first time since 1992 that our zoo has had a nocturnal area. It will mimic a nighttime habitat where they'll have more than as many as 300 bats, some ringtail cats, things called owl monkeys. Construction's underway on that now. It's supposed to be done next spring, 2018. And
So
then
will it be open at night, or?
it will be open during the day, but it
But
will
be
feel like
quiet at night.
nighttime
Okay,
inside.
okay.
But at night, will it seem like daytime?
You can interview the bats.
Very
I'm not
confused
sure.
bats,
The bats
yes.
might be very confused. They're also getting, thanks to the largest ever individual donation to the zoo from Joy and Boise Bollinger, $5 million. There's a new lion habitat going into the zoo. It's going to be a 1.5 acre exhibit on the site where the eland are now at the zoo. They will hopefully have 1 male and 2 to 3 females. There are no lions at our zoo right now due to the death of one by cancer and one who was retired to the Species Survival Center on the West Bank. The goal of that new lion habitat, besides allowing all of us to see lions, is with an eye towards breeding. That's why there will be 2 to 3 females and 1 male. The other big thing that is just under design right now for the new lion habitat, not expected to be finished until spring of 2019. The Center for Sustainable Wildlife is in phase 1 of construction on the West Bank. This is not something that's going to be open to the public except for maybe educational opportunities, but the goal is really to be like a modern day ark and save some species with giraffes and okapi and whooping cranes, and that's on the West Bank. It's a partnership with the San Diego Zoo. And finally, the Nature Center in New Orleans East, which we've talked about on this program before, is open to school groups and touring groups and things like that, but it will be open to all of us on Labor Day.
Wonderful. Well, there's a lot going on there.
There is.
It all sounds like fun. Thanks, Dawn. I'm going to go over to Mike now. We have a couple of minutes left for you to talk to us about those traffic cameras and how some folks were ticketed on League Avenue and they said, no, we're not accepting this, and they won. They got through.
That's right. And you can talk about murders all day long, but the one issue that seems to strike a nerve almost across the board
people's pocketbooks
is these traffic cameras. Now, those have multiplied, almost doubled since the start of the year, Well, it turns out that one of them on Leake Avenue, as you're approaching the Army Corps of Engineers from Jefferson, a camera caught, as we got from a public record request, 831 drivers for going over a speed limit that apparently nobody knew about, 25 miles an hour. We went and tracked where the last sign is as you enter that stretch of road. It's 35 miles an hour. Well, after these 800 plus tickets, finally a sign went up on May 11th, surprising everyone that the speed limit is now 25 miles an hour. Well, we caught that. A couple of the people who got those tickets were contesting them, got in touch with us, and the result of all that was the city immediately caught its blunder, said, you know, you're right, our bad. We're going to dismiss all 831 tickets. Those people who paid, like a lot of us, don't even really bother to fight City Hall, pay those things just to, you know, get it off the list,
Right.
and those will be refunded. Now, the interesting thing about the story is that I've now heard from other people who got tickets in other areas that are contesting on some grounds that look like they might be pretty solid. So it does open some questions on whether, you know, the city was maybe just a little too eager to start issuing tickets before proper signage, proper speed limits, and some other things that the law requires them to have.
And as you said, the more cameras are now placed around the city. Are there
There had
mobile
been
cameras too?
66, and they added 55 more to that since the beginning of the year. Some of those are mobile cameras, so
Yeah.
they're not stationed on the same spot every single day. The one on Leak was a mobile unit that jumps around to different parts of the city.
And there are also the warning signs all over the place saying there could be a
More,
camera
that's
here.
right, more warning signs, especially around school zones, but
Yeah.
more warning signs than the actual cameras.
Cameras, yeah.
But it is a cautionary tale that if you think you really have gotten a ticket unfairly, to go ahead and contest those. And here, the
If
831
not,
people,
call you.
831 people are not going to have to pay those tickets.
All right, Mike, thanks a lot. All right, time to look ahead. Errol.
Well, a sign that people are not giving up on the movie industry yet is that Monday there's going to be a dedication of a new movie facility out in eastern New Orleans across from MARCIA. It's supposed to be a full facility when everything is built, and it's the first new construction related to movie production in like a decade. So we're still in the hunt for the movies.
Still in the running. Good. Mike.
Yeah, WWL-TV, Channel 4, has a really interesting one-hour special coming up this upcoming Thursday by Katie Moore, who did a piece called Searching for Ramona, a mystery of a child lost in a fire, but no remains ever found, and trace that she lived or died. It remains a mystery, but there was so much reaction to that, she's stretching that into a one-hour-long special.
Okay, we'll be looking for that. Don.
So the congressmen were wearing LSU baseball hats last night. LSU plays in Omaha tomorrow, and there's a lot of buzz around this team. It will be fun to watch.
Okay, thanks, Steph.
The mayor was supposed to deliver his State of the City last Wednesday. He postponed it because Steve Scalise was shot, and there obviously people were focused on there, and the mayor actually did go to Washington. It's rescheduled for this coming Wednesday.
All right, guys. Thanks a lot for being here. Thank you all for joining us. And, of course, we want to see you again next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening.
The firm of Bowen, McLeod & Britt helps both large corporations and small businesses with insurance, risk management, and employee benefits using the same values they've held true for over 30 years: knowledge, vision, accountability, and service. More information is at bmbinc.com.